As far as knowledge of Marvel Phase 4 goes, there's not likely to be a new team-up, and I mean, we'll be seeing familiar characters together again inevitably in Black Widow, and in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, we are likely to be seeing an appearance from Wanda Maximoff and possibly Vision. But really, that's about it. We don't have any Avengers-level event here. It's planned for there to be a new Avengers movie at some point. It's planned for us to see the Fantastic Four at some point, X-Men at some point. And like a lot of other people, I feel like Phase 4 so far just kind of looks like it's full of throwbacks to the good old days, while throwing in some really Z-list characters. But I think I have an idea that might just remedy all that. Now, that's not me claiming that I am as smart, if not smarter, than anyone that works for Marvel Studios. I'm sure they've got something truly amazing cooked up, and I'm sure they're gonna make this all work. Now, I think we're all hoping for Spider-Man and Daredevil to get some kind of team-up in Marvel's version of Spider-Man 3. It's something there's been a lot of speculation about and a lot of fans have been dreaming about, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about how I'd love that for a team-up. I'm going to be trying to be out of the box. But like what Guardians of the Galaxy did, I have an idea that could expand a new part of the Marvel Universe while being spearheaded by a very beloved character. And one that I think we all want to see more of. I want to see Spider-Man and Blade team up to fight off an army of vampires. And here's how I want it to go. So like it or not, Sony Pictures are still developing Spider-Man-esque movies, in that they center around Spider-Man characters without really featuring Spider-Man. We've only had one of these so far, and that was Venom. And I thought Venom was really, really bad. Now, Venom was supposed to be the start of Sony's own cinematic universe using Spider-Man characters, which a lot of people think is really stupid, but to be 100% honest, I actually think that's a great idea. Spider-Man villains rock. They are second only to Batman villains. There is quite a fair bit that you can do with certain characters in Spidey's universe without Spider-Man. The origin story of Venom is not one of them, but if you have these characters from the get-go, then you're onto something a bit better. So Sony Pictures announced that the second project they would be making would be a Morbius, the living vampire movie, starring Jared Leto in the titular role. Now, like everybody else, I kind of laughed at the sense of desperation that I got from this, but at the same time, it's quite a smart idea. Unlike Venom, Morbius is the kind of character that can work much more independent of himself without Spider-Man at the origins. Venom's origins in the comic books tie directly to Spider-Man, and much of the point of Venom, in his early days anyway, is his hatred for Spider-Man. With Morbius, there's a lot more that you can do independently without Spider-Man's existence in this universe. However, a lot has changed in regards to Marvel and Sony's dealings with Spider-Man as a character since that first Venom movie and since the announcement of Morbius. The previous partnership deal between Marvel Studios and Sony Pictures, which didn't seem to allow Sony Pictures to use Peter Parker Spider-Man in their live-action movies, came to a bit of a gritty end earlier this year when talks to renew the deal kind of fell flat. There have been further talks since then, and Spider-Man is once again back in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. For how long, we don't know. The details are a little unclear, but what we do know is that there is one more Spider-Man film in the MCU at least, and a Spider-Man appearance in a larger ensemble movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it has since been hinted at that Spider-Man can now appear in Sony's independent cinematic universe films. Now, one thing Sony has wanted for quite some time is to maintain the control that they have over their characters and maintain their ownership, but at the same time they've expressed a great deal of interest in having all of these things exist within the MCU. And I mean, why wouldn't they? The MCU is literally a money machine at this point, and I guess that would work out for us because it means quality, right? It was clear from the start that Sony Pictures wanted Venom to take place within the MCU. And while we don't know for sure that films going forward from Sony Pictures will take place in the MCU, what we do know is that Spider-Man himself now has the power to cross over to different universes, according to Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal anyway. While Spider-Man will be in the MCU, it seems that he will be allowed to appear in Sony Pictures films going forward, which is probably what they mean when they say that he can traverse to different cinematic universes. And I don't think this is going to be acknowledged as something where he goes through like a portal to another dimension and he's spat out in the Sony universe. I think while MCU Spider-Man will appear in Morbius and Venom 2, these stories won't necessarily be acknowledged while in the MCU. So it's kind of like non-canon MCU sub-stories in a way. Now if, and this is a big if, Sony get the right producers and get the quality right on these films, that's a good thing. It means there's more Spidey, different focuses, and different stories. At worst, MCU Spidey gets a little bit of a stain on his reputation. I think Marvel Studios are kind of almost reluctant to have their Spider-Man appear alongside Sony's Venom because of the sheer quality difference between the two films. And you know what, fair enough, understandable, but if Sony say, we'd like to have Morbius in the MCU Spider-Man films, I say let them. Because I think Morbius being the main villain of a Spider-Man film could be a great idea. Now I'm gonna say this straight away, I don't really care for Morbius, to be honest. Like, I think he's an interesting character independent of himself, but as a Spider-Man villain he just feels out of place, because many of Spidey's rogues gallery are related strictly to science, and science being what created Spider-Man, science being what Peter is most interested in, they all kind of reflect Spidey in a different way. Morbius is a fantastical vampire. Now I'll say this, Morbius definitely shouldn't appear in the third MCU Spidey film, more like the fourth. Now here's kind of my vision, like, the whole identity crisis thing for Spider-Man has kind of evened out a little bit. Not everybody knows that he's Spider-Man now, he's kind of dispelled that. It was just a rumor all along, his name is cleared. Only a selection of his friends at Midtown High know his identity, allowing for this film to remain an ensemble piece with Ned and Betty and MJ, Mr. Harrington and Mr. Dell. Now the two recent Spider-Man films have been kind of 80s centric, they've been very 1980s obsessed, with Spider-Man Homecoming taking cues from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Spider-Man Far From Home taking cues from National Lampoon's European Vacation. They've been taking a lot of cues from the late 1980s, so let's say we move things over to the 90s for the next one, and have a film where vampires descend on New York City. Which is great because we get an expansion for the Marvel Cinematic Universe in introducing Marvel's vampires. Why stop at just Morbius when you can also introduce Dracula and Bessie the Hell Cow, among other vampires that Spidey and his friends must take down in a film that takes cues from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Morbius could lead the charge, but this would also be a chance to have Spidey face off with Blade, who is set to get his solo movie in 2022. But why wait when we could introduce him as a rival to Spider-Man in the first half of this film before Spidey realizes that Blade is out there to take down the other vampires, including Hellcow. I really just want to stress I want a Hellcow in this movie. Imagine Blade's introduction to the MCU being a versus movie. Spider-Man v Blade, you could call it, or maybe Spider-Man Home Invasion to keep up with the whole home thing. And then we could have Blade and Spider-Man working side by side to take on the vampires with the help of the kids at Midtown High. Kinda like a Spidey the Vampire Slayer sort of a thing. I think this is the only way you could really make Morbius work too well in an MCU Spider-Man film. Now, for the record, I don't know much about Morbius, so if what I say is offending any of you major Morbius fans, please let me know. All of this could kind of happen in Spidey's senior year as well. It's like, finally, it's all done, it's all wrapped up, I've got one more exam to do, but then bam, the vampires come. And this is kind of like one last extracurricular activity for Spider-Man and his friends. Save New York once again, in classic 90s horror fashion. And having Spidey team up with Blade would also coincide quite well with the whole Spider-Man team-up thing they've been doing for the MCU Spider-Man films. In Spider-Man Homecoming, we had Spider-Man team up with Iron Man. In Spider-Man Far From Home, we had Spider-Man team up with Nick Fury. And so in Spider-Man Home Invasion, we could have Spider-Man team up with Blade. As well as that, Spidey's been kind of traversing different genres with these films, with Spider-Man Homecoming kind of being like a John Hughes comedy, Spider-Man Far From Home taking on some more sort of espionage spy stuff, so a Spider-Man horror flick could be great. At the same time, if Spider-Man were to revert back to Sony Pictures, you could do this minus Blade. And it's also kind of like, well, Spidey, you faced Jake Gyllenhaal last time, now get ready to face Jared Leto. This could make for a really enjoyable sort of transitional Spider-Man movie as Spider-Man makes his way from kid to adult. And I think having Blade in it would make good use of the fact that this film is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we wouldn't need to have too many mentions of anything like Iron Man or stuff like that. I mean, I guess this idea could either work or be terrible depending on the portrayals of specific characters. It depends how Mahershala Ali's version of Blade plays out later on. It depends how Morbius is even going to play out. But I think when it comes to Morbius, making it too slow or too serious isn't going to be the way to go with Morbius. Unless they really, really make him an independent of himself character, unless they literally make this a vampire movie. But then what's really the point of putting it in Sony's universe of Marvel characters? Now look, this is hardly my ideal Spider-Man film, because again, I'm not the biggest fan of Morbius. I do prefer Spidey to be working alone, and I'm not absolutely massive on the idea of vampires in a Spider-Man movie. I'm not massive on vampires as it is, to be honest. But I do think this could be an enjoyable film, and I've pretty much already got my ideal Spider-Man movies, so I'd love to see them explore some other corners of the Marvel Universe in the next Spider-Man film. Or, well, the one after it. I still want to see Spider-Man dealing with the repercussions of Spider-Man Far From Home before that. Also, I'm dead serious, if Bessie the Hell Cow is in the MCU in any form, that would be amazing. I'm sure this movie's never gonna happen, but if they could do it in Blade, that would be great. Otherwise, Sony Pictures maybe consider getting the rights to Bessie the Hell Cow, and then we can have Bessie the Hell Cow in Morbius. I'd say a Spider-Man cameo in Morbius is kind of inevitable, but I'd kind of rather they make it count than just have Spider-Man be a cameo, but I realize it's far too late in production for that to happen. I just think, rather than do a Morbius sequel, if you can get the rights for these characters to really cross universes now, I think that's a much better idea than further Morbius sequels, and same goes for with Venom. I'd definitely rather have a Spider-Man and Venom team up than another Venom movie. And while, yeah, the quality of Venom 1 is far below anything in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'd still love to see these things all cross over at some stage. What do you guys think? Comment below and discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below are links to my Patreon and my Discord. This video is brought to you by Zentai for all your cosplay needs. Link is in the description below, and they are very cool and good. Cosplay your favorite characters or send in one of your own designs. Affordable prices and very high quality. Made to order and made to measure. But most of all, made to be heckin' awesome, if you couldn't already tell. Guys, can you believe where we are now and where we started? How long ago it was that Channel Pup, or Channel Goat even, came about? Because it really wasn't that long when you think about it. Can you believe the amount of support I've received from this community, from all of you subscribing to the channel and everything? It's unreal. It's a dream come true for me. But behind the YouTubers you watch usually comes a bit of a truth, is that they're often dirt poor. Now, I've had the good fortune of being able to grow this YouTube channel, and hopefully turn it into a career, but I'm gonna need a little bit of help along the way, to even the odds, to make ends meet, so that I can use all of the possible time that I have to make videos for you guys, as opposed to doing something mundane, for barely enough money to make it worth its while. I've done all that. I've lived that life. The fact is, together we all built Channel Pup. We made it what it is today, and I want to keep the ball rolling on that. I don't ever want to stop doing this, because this is the most gratifying job I've ever had, and I think the most pleasurable hobby anyone could ever have. I don't take any of the support that I receive from you guys for granted, but if in any way you're wondering if maybe you could do a little more for the channel even, then I want to direct you to the Patreon link in the description below. It would mean the world to me to have your support via Patreon. It can help me to make ends meet. It can help me to better my content. It can help me to have more time to really work on this stuff. But you know what? I'm not just going to take your support and run. No way, Jose. In the Patreon, you can access exclusive videos via the Pups Project Room playlist, where you can see different projects that I've been working on or have worked on that have either not made it to YouTube for general viewing or have been cancelled, or, well, you can get a little view of the process that goes behind the Channel Pup videos and productions. As well as that, you tend to get advanced previews of the bigger Channel Pup projects, our tentpole event projects. If you've seen Marvelous Tales of Spider-Man, you'll be aware that that was released on the Patreon first, and 20 days later approximately was released for general viewing on YouTube. That's not the only time I'm gonna do this. But you know what? If you can't do the Patreon, or are just not interested in doing the Patreon, I fully understand. Like, it's still a big ask in my opinion. And what counts most is your support. So, as always, thank you so much, guys. I've been Channel Pup, and I will think of a better catchphrase next time. Now please leave me alone!